Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Desmond Blackburn. Please give that voice from God another round of applause, please. I'd be remiss if I didn't start out with a sincere message of appreciation for that warm and touching introduction by our outgoing county manager. Please give Mr. Whitten a round of applause. To give leadership to this great county for the last several years. This county found a good Omega man to take care of that responsibility. It wasn't hard. He's the only good Omega man. I mean, it wasn't that hard. I had to get him back while I fidget with my technology here. Here we go. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Those words were spoken by former President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. None of us get where we are solely by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We get here because somebody, a parent, a teacher, an Ivy League crony, or a few nuns, bent down and helped us pick up our boots. First African-American Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. As a young black boy, it made me proud to see black leaders that did something amazing and made the world change. Contemporary musician, John Legend. Every young person in America deserves a world-class education. We've got an obligation to give it to them, said the 44th President of the United States of America, Barack Obama. I want you, my son, to learn how to speak proper and appropriate English. For I do not want your race identified simply by listening to you over the phone, said Desmond Barrington Blackburn, my first teacher, the best man in my wedding, my father. My father was born in 1947 on the island of Jamaica. He migrated to America in the late 60s simply because the island of Jamaica, rich in culture, had become quite lonely without the young lady he fell in love with, my mother. He was very, very persistent about his son, his firstborn, learning how to speak appropriately. He used to say to me, I was born in another country. I came here as an adult. It is understandable why my race and my culture can be determined simply by having a phone conversation with me. But he told his firstborn, his only son, you, boy, have no excuse. While he only attained a high school diploma, he is still the smartest man that I know. Next to his bed on the day he died were his two favorite books, the Bible and Webster's Dictionary. The Bible gave him relief from the pain and agony that cancer brought to his life. He was an avid reader of the dictionary throughout his entire life. As a curious child, I once asked him, Daddy, why do you read the dictionary? I mean, it just seemed kind of odd that he would read the dictionary. He responded simply, I want to know the meaning of words. The crisis that we're talking about right now in education can be summed up for me in three words: engagement, personalization, and the social condition of mankind. I'm going to start with engagement. Doing school has become difficult, has become a chore for our children, simply because the adults in their lives, we have not always kept up for their yearn for instant gratification. Previous generations, many of us in this room, we believed the stories that were told us. Stick to it, stay in school for 12 years, 13 years, go to college for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, graduate, all for an entry-level position, commit yourself 30 years to an organization that may or may not reciprocate in its commitment to you. We believed that narrative. But today's child, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid, ladies and gentlemen. Personalization, our inability to connect with the diversity of our children, the widespread diversity of our children. Kids today will tell you, I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have desires, or I don't. I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Hispanic, I'm gay, I'm straight. I'm a visual learner versus an auditory learner. I prefer to work with my hands rather than to read chapters of Shakespeare. We are not effectively tapping in to the individual and assisting the individual with his or her realities in life. We're not doing a good job connecting, engagement. The last piece of the crisis, in my opinion, is the social condition of mankind. We have third world countries, not only on the globe, but we have third world countries right here in this country. We have third world countries right here in this county. We have communities of people who are without resources, social resources, political resources, financial resources. Within these internal third world countries, we have experienced almost the complete destruction of the family structure. And the only examples of success that many kids are exposed to are by way of sports, entertainment, or the drug trade. So my friends, engagement, personalization, and social condition of mankind are working together in concert to create a crisis in education. We need to address this crisis in education for all of our students. Thank you. Now, let me address what some of you may have identified as the pink elephant in the room when I speak about the crisis of education. I'm the first black superintendent in Brevard County. In a speech that I'm delivering at a Black History Month function, at an event to discuss the crisis in black education, I've just totally flipped the script and made the conversation about all students. As the kids would probably say upstairs, what's up with that? So let me explain. Those of you who are not as fortunate and blessed as I am to spend a lot of time with kids today may not realize that children today are not as appreciative of the differences that we've seen or acknowledged in previous generations. Let me give a little history of my family. My grandparents were born, I believe my grandfather was born 1913 or 1914, the early 20th century, where at that time, according to the stories he told his grandson, there was more or less complete and absolute acceptance as African Americans or people of color being second-class citizens in this country. Differences among races were noted, largely accepted. It was the way things were. My mother-in-law grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. And I would ask her, how did you do it? She said simply, we accepted it and stayed where we were supposed to stay. My parents came along in the 40s and 50s during the mid-20th century, grew up in the 60s and 70s, where civil protests and challenging of the notion of African Americans being second-class citizens started to gain momentum. I call that the era of Malcolm, Martin, Thurgood, and I heard a song by Marvin Gaye here earlier, so that reminded me of Marvin as well. Differences were noted, and the beginnings of widespread rejection of the notion of African Americans and other people of color being second-class citizens started to take root. Yet still, we were very much separated. Then there's me and my contemporaries. We closed out the 20th century, born in the 60s and 70s, grew up in the 80s and 90s. Still, like many of you, I grew up in a racially segregated community. But our generation takes the birth of the hip-hop culture as one of our credits, which had at its core the struggle for equality. Artists and noted public figures like Public Enemy and Spike Lee and Tavis Smiley began to lead popular culture and our subculture. Differences were still very much noted, but those differences were boldly being rejected. And we also saw the emergence of the African American middle class and the upper middle class. Now let's talk about the kids who are upstairs right now. Our children, born into the early 21st century. What I'm about to say, I know sounds very foreign to you, but doesn't sound very foreign to those kids sitting upstairs. All many of those babies have ever known is a black man as president of the United States of America. That is a phenomenal feat, something that many of us thought we would never, ever see. Everything comes with a double-edged sword, however. I can tell you what has kept me sharp through life is knowing that there are potholes on the road that I'm trying to travel. Today's youth doesn't always realize that there are potholes on the roads that they are traveling. Millions of white children and Hispanic children live in homes where their parents are not pro-segregation or anti-people of color, but in fact are and were diehard supporters of the first African-American president of the United States of America. It gets deeper. Children with disabilities today are often protected by their non-disabled peers. It gets deeper. Heterosexual youngsters often advocate on behalf of their brothers and sisters in the LGBT community. Affluent children today often find themselves contributing and or volunteering on behalf of the less fortunate. Our children, our babies, who are sitting right above our heads, like it or not, agree with it or not, are not as connected to all the racial and cultural differences as generations in the past, which is going to make connecting with them even more difficult. It's contributing to a widening generation gap and our inability to be driving forces in their lives. I watched President Obama's final speech to the nation as president, and I believe what he said. We're absolutely better off than we've been. We're not nearly where we need to be. He also said, which I think was extremely important, that we all, capital A-L-L, need to look at life through the lens of our brother or our sister and essentially recognize our similarities in life and not simply focus on all of our differences in life. As I say that, believe me, I'm not oblivious to the very unique challenges I face in life as an African American man. I will tell you that a significant portion of what allows me to be me is my connection to human beings of other races, religions, genders, to understand their struggle and their walk in life. Like many of the men in this room, I look around. This weekend, I'll find myself in some department store at the very last minute in search of a not-so-expensive gift that I pray will effectively articulate to my wife her meaning to me. I'm kidding. She's not going to let me go cheap. Okay, so I'll walk that department store, but I won't be dressed like I am today. I may have on jeans, ripped jeans. You know, I do get a little stylish. I may have on a t-shirt. My hat may be turned backwards. I'm hearing that the temperature is going to dip a little bit this weekend. I may even have on a hoodie. Regardless of what Mr. Witten read about me, I may receive questionable looks and/or stares in the jewelry store or the Coach store or the Louis store, simply because of where I'm from, how I look, and how I'm dressed. That, my friends, is an unfortunate reality. What is equally unfortunate, this weekend, as I'm in the department store, one of my Muslim brothers may be in the airport rushing to catch a plane to go see his boo. That's significant other for those of you who need to translate. As he's rushing through that airport, he may receive the same, if not worse, questionable looks, stares, and a potential interruption to his day. We've come so far, yet the journey ahead of us is still a lengthy one for all of us. So let's talk about the crisis. If there is a crisis, then there are certain actions that should be evident in all of our communities, right? When the hurricane was coming a few months ago, there were actions that were very, very evident in our communities. We were buying water. We were buying batteries. We were putting the shutters up. We were doing all those things because the crisis was coming. If we believe the crisis is here, then there are some things that should be very, very evident in our day-to-day lives. First and foremost, if the crisis is here, then we all, self-included, need to step up our parenting game for our children. As I shared with you about my father, we are our children's first teachers, protectors, providers, fathers especially. We are losing young men of color at rates much faster than we're losing any other gender or any other male in other cultures. If the crisis is here, then we have to get really, really serious about our mentoring efforts. Reaching back, reaching down, pulling up our fellow man, our fellow woman to where we are. Students, I hope you're listening, because if we are in a crisis, then we need to strive for A's and B's and other extracurricular accomplishments. A's and B's. There are only two letters on a report card that matter. A's and B's, okay? C stands for can do better. D stands for digging the hole deeper. And F, find another home. Oh, that's what my parents told me. If the crisis is here in our professional lives, we really need to strive for positions of leadership and or business ownership within our chosen fields. If the crisis is here, and some of the words, and especially the song that brought me to the microphone, was so appropriate. I don't know who created it, but this notion of separation of church and state has seen better days, because we're probably missing a whole lot of God in our children. So we do, if the crisis is here, we must love our neighbors as we love ourselves and bring our children to his word. If the crisis is here, then we must be loyal and patriotic citizens to all people. We must resist the temptation to assume ill of an entire group of people due simply to the horrific actions of a few wayward souls from a community. Last but not least, role models. If the crisis is here, we must take our position as role models very, very seriously as we create a blueprint via our lives for those kids upstairs to follow. Before I take my seat and or open up, I don't know if we have time or opportunity for questions, but I want to read to you a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "I am convinced that love is the most durable power in the world. It is not an expression of impractical idealism, but of practical realism. Far from being the pious injunction of a utopian dreamer, love is an absolute necessity for the survival of our civilization. To return hate for hate does nothing but intensify the existence of evil in the universe. Someone must have sense enough and religion enough to cut off the chain of hate and evil, and this can only be done through love." Happy Black History Month, Brevard County. Please, I just heard I have as much time as I want to answer questions, and that's a dangerous proposition. Very, very dangerous proposition. I'm here. I'm your superintendent. No holds barred. Ask me a question, and you just may get an answer. Yes, sir. Question was, can I share with you some of the priorities you can expect for 2017? We're trying really, really hard to focus all of our attention on 5 big goals, 5 big rocks for our school system. Many of them, in an indirect way, were mentioned in my comments. So first and foremost is to do everything possible for us to meet all of the social and emotional needs of all of our children, K-12. Part of that crisis we have right now in education is not so much an academic crisis, but more of a social crisis, in that many of our kids in many of our communities, for one reason or another, just don't have a lot of time for education. So we have to address those social and emotional needs. Second to that, number 2, is if and when a student does something unstudent-like, some type of antisocial behavior, I am an absolute fan of firm, fair, consistent discipline. But what we have right now, where we don't have a unified discipline plan throughout the system, where we have an inequitable distribution of consequences for our children, where we have children who live in poverty, children who have an exceptionality, and children who are African American are suspended or expelled at rates double their existence in the entire population. Where that's happening, we have to have a unified discipline plan so that we're ready to respond appropriately when children act out of character. Now for the more direct academic pieces. Most individuals in life as adults who struggle through life struggle through lack of literacy, struggle through their inability to read and comprehend and use reading in order to traverse the world. And that problem has been overlooked in our earliest years. So a refocus in this district around early learning, early literacy strategies, not just from pre-K to 2, but we may have to go set up shop outside these hospitals, and as they come out, there's some instruction waiting for them, okay? Third grade is far too long to wait. We've played that game enough. Then in our middle grades, there is a gatekeeper course. There's some gatekeeper skills. It's called algebra. Algebra right now is a high school graduation requirement, but I'm going to hit the nail on the head. If your exposure to algebra begins in high school, you're already behind the 8 ball. You need algebraic proficiency and excellence before you walk into anybody's high school. And then after that, you come in, your literacy rates are where they're supposed to be. We have met your social and emotional needs. We have not inappropriately given you consequences. You are algebraically proficient. Now it's time to get you across that stage and get you the heck out of our houses, right? And I say that with great passion because I'm a parent of 2 boys myself, and I have plans for their bedrooms, okay? So they have to go, and they can't keep asking me for money. So graduation, college career readiness is paramount. They have to go. I tell my sons, like my dad told me, this is a temporary situation we got going on right now. This is not a lifetime commitment. Those are our 5 priorities. More questions? Sir.
I'm from North Brevard, in Titusville. And I understand that there needs to be some chance that the elementary school on Garden Street be open.
The question was, he's from Titusville, and he hears that we may be reopening an elementary school up there. Let's see, this Tuesday, coming up, Valentine's Day, our board members will receive a recommendation from me to manage our capital plan and also to accommodate all of our children that we anticipate coming to Brevard and staying in Brevard. Part of that recommendation is to reopen South Lake Elementary School. We've actually already started, hopefully some of you have participated. Board member Misty Belford has been leading community engagement sessions up in Titusville, where we're not just going to open or reopen the school, but I believe in a great deal of community input before we make any of our decisions. Okay, so if you have not been to any of those sessions, please come out. Misty Belford, board member, she's our board chair right now, and that is our recommendation that they will vote on this coming Tuesday. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm proud of Brevard County for selecting a person that looks like me in our school system.
I'm proud of them for selecting me too.
My question is, what about the kids that will not be going to college for whatever reason? Are there any plans to prepare them to be able to become self-sufficient without a college degree?
Yes, there is. I'm glad you asked that question. We refer to it as Project 2018. It is a multifaceted plan right now where we are really kicking in gear our commitment to career technical education in some very specific areas. Aerospace, manufacturing, hospital, medical, some other areas as well. We also want to add on to our already pretty robust career technical training programs in all of our schools and do more within the trades areas, your plumbings, your automotive, and things like that. So those plans are absolutely on the books. Now, here's the thing, though, I got to tell you. Just a clarification on what it takes to travel the career technical road. Sometimes when I'm approached in the vein of not all of our kids are academically inclined, so they need another route. Have you seen a test recently to become a mechanic? It is not for people who are not academically inclined. Because that thing that many of us drove here today is not a car. I hate to tell you, we used to have cars. It's a computer. It's a high-tech computer. And so your academic faculties have to be there. But I also believe strongly in that once we, as I mentioned earlier, once we pique your interest, those academic skills tend to follow if we are teaching you within an area that you have great interest. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Sir.
You spoke of the importance of mentoring in solving the crisis. Do you have information about funding for mentoring programs when you have professionals in place that are ready, willing, and able to head up programs that would involve the mentoring of our youth?
I'll take a crack at it. One of the boards that I sit on is actually being formed right now. It's called a Children's Services Council. There's a lot of legwork still left to be done, but if that gets up and running in the next year and a half or two, then there will be additional funds here in the county to support programs that seek to mentor children. Okay. Other than that, I would say to continue to reach out to the nonprofits that already exist here in the county in order to get funding for mentoring. I do need to say, I know my time is short. Got this big old Omega man trying to get all close to me, Dr. Smith, wasn't he? We'll take care of him? Okay, yeah. I'm not alone here. We do need more funding for mentoring. I would also tell you that not only do we need more funding, but we need more social and organizational acceptance for who our mentors are going to be, okay? Sometimes a man or a woman has a mistake or two long time ago, has paid debt to society, but we don't always give those men and women second and third opportunities. We say it, but we don't always do it. And some of those men and women are exactly who we need in front of our children. I hate to talk about my family so much, but I have a father-in-law, and he served on the advisory board of his church several times. He's picked pastors, and he often says he doesn't trust a pastor who doesn't have a little sin in his life too, because his logic is, how are you going to help direct me and keep me away from temptation if you've never faced or overcome? Weird little logic, but, you know, that's my family. I've told you about just about all of it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you, Dr. Blackburn. Dr. Blackburn is as impressive a young man as you'll ever meet. And so we're very fortunate to have him in our community. I'm very fortunate, the part of the secret to my success is I have people praying for me, and I have friends that are much smarter than me, and I consider Dr. Blackburn one of my friends. We have a token, the diversity team has a token of their appreciation for your accepting the invitation and doing such a fabulous job. We think this may help you with this weekend, but we're not sure. You may need to add a little bit to it, but we certainly appreciate you, Dr. Blackburn.